Hi, my name is Kelsey and I'm a speech language pathologist. Chances are you're watching this video either because you or maybe other people can't understand when your child speaks. In this video, I'm going to be going over 5 tips to increase your child's intelligibility or amount they can be understood. Before getting started, I just want to say that when children are learning to speak, it is typical for them not to be understood 100% of the time. It's also typical for caregivers or parents of the children to understand them more than others who aren't with them as often. As a reference, according to speech language pathologist Dr. Caroline Bowen, by 18 months, children should be understood about 25% of the time by their parents. By 24 months, between 50 and 75% of the time. And by 36 months, between 75 and 100% of the time. I'm also going to put a link down below if you're interested in reading about this research more or other research that I found. But let's go ahead and dive into the tips. The first tip I have is to slow down your rate of speech. Speaking quickly may come naturally to us as adults, but for a child who is just learning to speak, it may be beneficial for us to slow down so that they can really hear all the individual sounds in a word. The second tip I have is to repeat their mistakes with correct pronunciation. When a child makes a mistake with their sounds or the pronunciation when they're speaking, you can go ahead and just repeat what they say, but in the correct way. For example, if they say, "I want spaghetti," you can just simply say, "Okay, I will get you the spaghetti." You can see in that example how I emphasize the words or the word that they mispronounced, spaghetti. So it kind of draws attention to it. And you also see how I didn't say, "Oh no, that's not how you say it." I just kind of repeated the word and did it in a correct way so they can hear that modeled for them. The third tip I have is to make sure they can see your face when you are talking to them. This will help them focus on how your mouth moves when you're making the different sounds in the words or sentences you're using. The fourth tip I have is to speak at an appropriate volume. Modeling an appropriate volume when you speak will help your child gauge the appropriate volume for their speech. The fifth and last tip I have is a little different than the rest and will differ depending on the individual needs of your child. My recommendation is that if your child is already working with a speech language pathologist for some certain sounds or their pronunciation and you want to practice at home, you can set aside about 5 minutes per day to practice these sounds together. Repetition is key when learning the pronunciation of sounds. So in general terms, the more practice, the better. You can, of course, speak to your child's speech language pathologist to get more specific recommendations for your child's individual needs. Please note that this last tip is only for children of caregivers who have already received a evaluation from a licensed speech language pathologist and they have determined that they need this articulation therapy. The reason this will be important is because children develop different sounds at different ages. So there's different developmental norms that you'll want to be sure are being paid attention to before just trying to correct your child's pronunciation on something, even if they're not old enough yet. The evaluation by a speech language pathologist will help the parents determine which sounds are appropriate to be working on them with. Well, that wraps up my tips on how to increase the amount your child can be understood by others. But if you have any questions, of course, leave them in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video and have a good day.